Do you think that the way the current left uses Marxism turns into a Dungeons and Dragons nerd club for PMC adjacent intellectuals instead of solutions and working class people?
Okay, well, I have to I have to cop to the fact that I never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I can guess what you mean. Sort of, you know. I think. Look, what's really valid? What's really valid is class matters. There are capitalists. There are workers. Um, the impact of production matters. We have to understand those things to be able to address certain parts, not all, certain parts of what's going on in the world. Those are all valid observations. And much of the specifics that people put into doing that are really insightful and necessary. But yeah, I think it's often, postmodernism. There were some valid points, but there was a lot of verbiage that surrounded and obscured the valid points instead of really putting them across. And as I experienced it, I felt that a lot of that was posturing. A lot of that was to make it seem like people were super smart, and they weren't. And you should never use language and formulations that are more than what is needed to convey the ideas that you wish to convey. For example, dialectics. What the heck is dialectics? What is it? What the hell? There's two questions. Is it something? And then after that question, there's the question, okay, do you need it for anything? Ask somebody who is an advocate of the importance of becoming familiar with and versed in and facile with dialectics, what he needed or she needed dialectics in order to know that he or she could not have known without it. Right? In other words, if I have to master this thing, if I have to read all this stuff, which is so obscure that I can't even finish a sentence, much less paragraphs, call me stupid, okay. But then tell me what your study of dialectics enabled you to understand, enabled you to conceive or to envision, that helps your organizing, and that you wouldn't have been able to do without ever having read a word about it. And the same thing goes almost as strongly, not quite, for this thing called historical materialism. But there's another problem, which is some of what you learn and what you become facile with historical materialism not only doesn't help you, it hurts you. Or so I would think, and so I wrote in the essay.
How would you say it hurts you, historical materialism?
Well, I think when normal human beings utilize this thing called historical materialism, they tend to become economistic. What does that word mean? Mm-hmm. Some people think it means that I'm saying, if I say Marxism is economistic, they think I'm saying everybody who's a Marxist pays attention only to economics. Well, okay, if I was saying that, I'd be an idiot, because it's not the case. It's obviously not the case. Marxists pay attention to all manner of things, racism, sexism, and so on. So it doesn't mean that. So does it mean that they give unduly extra attention to economics than they give to, say, patriarchy or racism or authoritarianism? Well, sometimes it certainly means that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Some Marxists give more attention to racism, some, etc. I think what it does mean is that Marxists are told by the tradition, when you pay attention to racism, when you pay attention to sexism, when you pay attention to authoritarianism, do it with your eyes on economics. Pay attention to how those other sides of life or spheres of life impact economics and how economics impacts them. But it doesn't say the other domains, so feminism, anti-racism, or I like to call it intercommunalism, or anti-authoritarianism, or Marxism, that they have concepts and insights that bear on their part of life that are fundamental, just like the ones that economics has that are fundamental. And so it narrows the perspective unduly. And it's my experience is that when times become more crisis, a crisis dynamic and urgency, when times become more urgent and organizing becomes accurate on our minds, the tradition of Marxism, even worse, the tradition of Marxism-Leninism, but the tradition weighs on us and pressures us and starts to generate an economistic focus. So that's one problem that I have with the substance, not the style. In other words, the making it more complex than it needs to be style. Anything can have that. And the other problem is a substantive problem, that it narrows our attention span, and it has us see sexuality, gender, race, religion, all these things through an economics lens, more for some people than for others. But we don't need to do that. We could have underlying concepts that fight against that tendency, and that tendency is all the more concerning because, of course, we live in a society that tends to cause us all to have racial and gender and sexual and other biases, which need to be combated by our concepts, not aggravated by them. I think this problem, I should say, just to be clear, so people don't run out of the room, that most Marxists actually agree on this. They actually see the need to add dimensions to Marxism and are trying to do so. This has been going on for decades. The tradition sort of fights it a little bit, but most activists and organizers do pay attention and do try to see the fundamental insights that come from those other domains of life. There's another problem with Marxism that has to do with economics, and that one I think is much more damning ultimately.
Go ahead, Pascal.
So you find it problematic that Marxism or some Marxists would posit that the ultimate motivating factor behind racial social strife are conflicts over material realities between various classes of individuals over time, and that they produce the antagonisms that play out over time into what becomes politics, culture, society, and everything else.
Yeah, so to put what you're saying in a less clear, more obtuse manner, which is the way it's usually put, so I commend you putting it the way you put it, there's this economic fundamental basement, a base, and there's a lot of other stuff, culture, family, community, etc. And that economic base sort of impacts the rest and contours the rest and affects the rest. I think that's true. But I think what makes it false is when you say, not you, but when someone says that happens and the reverse doesn't happen. That is, there's the dynamics between genders and around family and so on, they don't have that same importance. They don't radiate influences throughout society. Same for racism. The impact is from economy, not from the more basic to race, racial underpinnings or gender underpinnings and so on. So if the Marxist says, yeah, but what we produce is essential for life. That's true. It's also true that being born is essential for life. That living in a living unit and being nurtured and cared for is essential to life. There's nothing that you can say that can't be said about other domains. I think community, the forging of relationships among people, holidays, language, etc., is fundamental. These other spheres of life, polity and social arrangements, political arrangements, these things are also central to society. And if we're going to have a movement, I think, that's going to overcome all this, then it needs to have concepts that don't say one approach to struggle is predominant, and we should understand the rest in terms of that one. It seems to me far more the case that, yes, we should understand racial struggle or religious struggle or gender struggle or sexual struggle. We should see that there's an economic impact and an economic part. But we should also see that in the economy, the dynamics that go on reflect influences from those other spheres, right? The kinship sphere and family and gender and the racial and ethnic and religious, the community sphere of life and the polity. And so it goes both ways. It isn't some kind of one-way causality. And trying to prioritize it accomplishes nothing except, sort of creating a false fight, a false argument.
But one of the ways that I would somewhat push back here is that
Go ahead.
we do have the time frame of history. And one of the things that I think there is a value in historical materialism, and I know you might have a problem with the concept of dialectical materialism, is that we can look at what have been the material motivations over time that have brought us through historical moments. And there are epochs, periods, there are high points, low points of time in history, conflicts in time and space, rises of empires, falls of empires, industrial revolutions, technological advancements, changes of gender norms over societies over time, changes of racial paradigms. These things all have happened within the spaces of physical realities that have largely been influenced by certain forces that have happened within a 500 to 2,000 year period of time for a variety of reasons. All right?
And sure. And you notice I didn't say let's take a really radical feminist position and say, well, okay, the base is family and kinship. Without that, we have nothing. Without that, we don't have a society, without etc. And it is pushing everything else. I didn't say that. What I said is that each are pushing. Each are having a fundamental impact on society. And each are helping define the rest. If you look in a factory and you see class relations, well, we should get to the fact that I think that we see those wrong. But okay, so you look in the factory and you see class relations. You see groups of people whose situation causes them to act in situations similarly, to have shared interests and so on. What if a feminist looks in a factory and says, I see mothers and fathers. I see sexism and misogyny. I see that people's roles include a kinship dimension, let's call it. And what if somebody else comes along and looks in the factory, looks in the workplace, looks in the economy, and sees racial struggle and racial dimensions? They're right. There's no point arguing about it in my mind. And there's no point in trying to, it's not necessary to say, I believe economics is predominant in order to say economics is very, very important, profoundly important. And where it's important, we should understand it. Fine. what's the point of saying we have to march behind a banner that says class is what matters, view all other struggles insofar as they affect class? That's really the message. Why can't we say there are a few things that are profoundly important: class, community or race, religion, etc., kinship, and power, authority, what the anarchists would say. And we need to view each of those struggles with an eye toward how the other impacts them and how they impact the other. I think that's happening in Marxism. That's why you get Marxist feminism, and you get racialized capitalism, and you get anarcho-Marxism or Marxist. They're trying to, and this has been going on for a long time now. People are trying to find some way to have the benefits of both, and I think that's a good, healthy thing. But when I did that decades ago, many decades ago, we had this feeling very early on that there was something wrong with this approach to trying to find, the goat of areas of life, and so this sort of holistic approach began to emerge, and I think it's been progressing. It was like intersectionality before intersectionality, and it included economy, whereas intersectionality often seems to leave out economy. I've never been able to understand why, but it's a. But I hope we'll get to what ultimately matters more, because when we did that, and we sort of thought, well, how do we get a framework, an intellectual framework, which will cause us to see all those dimensions and not to argue about which is most important, but to act on their importance? And so we looked at feminism and we thought, pretty good, right? Not bad. It's going to get better over time, but okay with anti-racism and okay with anarchism. We looked at Marxism and we said, hold on a minute. There's a problem here. The others are on the road to a powerful framework. Marxism has lots of powerful insights, but it has some things that are off the road to having a powerful intellectual framework. That in fact